Good afternoon and welcome. I welcome you all to the City of Casey Council meeting on the 21st of February. My name is Nolene Duff and I'm the Chair of the Panel of Administrators. I'll open the meeting this afternoon with the Statement of Acknowledgement. The City of Casey proudly acknowledges the traditional owners, Casey's Aboriginal communities and their rich culture, and pays respect to their elders past, present and future. We acknowledge Aboriginal people as Australia's first peoples and as the traditional owners and custodians of the land on which we work and live. The Diversity Statement. The City of Casey is home to remarkable diversity with many cultures, languages, faiths and communities of worship, ages, LGBTQI+ identities and landscapes, together forming our rich and dynamic community story. From our first Australians to our most recent arrivals and every wave between, the City of Casey welcomes and represents all community members and their respective ambitions to live healthy, rewarding and happy lives. We recognise this diversity as our strength and we aim to share, nurture and celebrate it. I'd like to introduce the members of our panel here with us today. Mr Miguel Belmar.
Good afternoon, Chair.
And thank you for joining us, Mr Cameron Boardman.
Good afternoon, Chair.
Thank you. We also have present our Chief Executive Officer, Mr Glenn Patterson, and a number of our senior staff, Ms Jen Bednar, Director Customer and Business Transformation, James Collins, Director City Planning and Infrastructure, Callum Patty, Director Community Life, and Steve Coleman, Director Corporate Services. We also have our governance, our governance manager, Holly de Kretzer, and we're supported this afternoon by Simon, our AV technician, and Nicole in governance. I now move to item 2, which is the confirmation of minutes. And there's one set of minutes to be confirmed this afternoon, that being the meeting of the 13th of December 2022. Is there a mover and a seconder to confirm the minutes?
Yes, I'll move those.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. And a seconder?
Seconded, Chair.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. I'll put that to the vote. All in favour? Carried. Thank you. Item 3, declaration of interests. I've considered my obligations under Section 130 of the Local Government Act 2020 and have no conflicts relevant to today's agenda papers to declare. Do any council officers or my fellow administrators have any conflicts with the agenda this afternoon?
Chair, no conflicts under the Act, only a personal declaration as to the item that deals with the library, and that is that I'm a member of that board.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. Duly noted. Nothing to declare, Mr Boardman.
Chair, I have no declarations to make.
Thank you very much. Now move to item 4, which is public question time, and we have 7 public questions submitted through Council's website for this afternoon's Council meeting. Question 1 and 2 are from Troy Van Grop with respect to the Hampton Park Hill Development Plan. And those questions, I'll read both of the questions and both of the answers. Question 1, I'd like to understand if Council agrees that it is culpable for the impact to over 1,000 residents impacted by the Hampton Park Hill Development Plan, because Council approved development plans for the residential subdivisions and is now changing the land use adjacent to the residential areas that they approved and have been generating revenue from. And question 2, what is Council's compensation plan for impacted households as a result of the decision made with relation to the Hampton Park Hill Development Plan, given the Council which approved the subdivision of the impacted land is culpable of placing homeowners in a position to have their investments substantially impacted? And I thank the Acting Manager Planning and Building for the responses to these questions. The first response with regard to the first question is, any decisions to approve residential subdivision adjacent to land affected by the draft Hampton Park Development Plan were made in accordance with the planning controls applicable at the time of the decision. Similarly, any decision regarding the draft development plan would need to be consistent with any planning policies. The development plan precinct has been identified by the Victorian State Government through the statewide Waste and Resource Recovery Implementation Plan, the SWRRIP, as a significant waste and resource recovery site. The Hallam Road Waste and Resource Recovery Hub Plan sits underneath the statewide Waste and Resource Recovery Implementation Plan and also provides specific direction from the state government for the development plan precinct regarding waste and resource recovery activities. With respect to question 2, as is established in planning case law, any potential change to property values is not a planning consideration. Any decision must accord with the relevant planning controls applicable at the time of making a decision. As a decision is yet to be made on the draft Hampton Park Hill development plan, any impact is not yet known. Once all submissions have been considered and modifications made to the development plan where considered appropriate, a report will be presented to Council for consideration and a decision on the development plan. So thank you, Mr. Troy Van Grop, for your question. Question 3 and question 4 are from Michael Ball about the Berwick Springs Reserve Playground toilet block. Question 3, current draft proposals for Parkside Boulevard Reserve, which is much larger, does not include a toilet block. The current playground at Mundara Drive, Berwick, does not have a toilet block. The much larger playground on the Esplanade NWS, which has tennis courts, outdoor gym facilities, basketball court, and an extremely large playground and barbecue, does not have toilets. Why would Council put toilets at a small playground in Berwick Springs, noting it will be in public view from the Berwick Springs Promenade against residents' wishes? Question 4, also from Mr. Ball. In 2016, approximately 30 to 40 residents signed a petition opposing a toilet block at the Berwick Springs Reserve. Residents have now submitted a petition, double in number at 80 signatures, opposing the current toilet block proposal for a variety of reasons, and that petition will be tabled later in this meeting. Will Council, as respected in 2016, acknowledge residents' concerns in 2023 and remove this toilet block from the current playground upgrade? The manager at City and Asset Planning has provided the following response. In 2016, Council endorsed the Master Plan for Berwick Springs Wetland Reserve, which outlined proposed future projects at the reserve. A public toilet was proposed adjacent to the playground along the Esplanade. 144 of the 212 respondents supported the proposed delivery of a toilet. Further consultation was then conducted in 2018 as part of the Master Plan implementation, which included the community tennis court, playground extension and outdoor fitness. Feedback again highlighted the community's desire for a public toilet at the reserve. The chosen location near to Berwick Springs Promenade was chosen as it would have the highest visitation due to the proximity to the popular play space, wetland viewing platforms, on-street parking and Berwick Springs Park Run, which takes place every Saturday at 8 a.m. and has an average of 100 to 150 participants. Designs for the proposed public toilet and its operation are yet to commence. However, through this process, Council officers intend to seek feedback from interested community members to ensure the toilet is safe and functional for all users with minimal visual intrusion to surrounding residents. Consultation will take place via Council's engagement portal, Casey Conversations. Question 5 is from Giuseppe Telato, and it's with regard to garden waste bins. Why are residents of Casey that live on larger than normal house blocks, i.e. half an acre or more, unable to purchase more than 2 garden waste bins? The larger blocks naturally generate a greater amount of green waste and 2 bins are often not sufficient to cater for this. Our Manager Waste and Sustainability has advised the City of Casey Garden and Food Waste Service is based on 2 40-litre bins and designed to cater for the vast majority of residential properties. Properties requiring more than 2 council-supplied garden and food waste bins are encouraged to manage their organic waste on-site through home composting or mulching, or to engage private garden waste collection services. Question 6 is from Viv Payne, and it's with regard to the playground in Banjo Patterson Reserve, Lynbrook. Can administrators please explain why the major playground in Banjo Patterson Reserve, Lynbrook was removed before Christmas, thus depriving local children of this much-loved facility over the school holidays? Why was the playground left vacant for months, and when will the overdue new playground finally be installed? Our manager of City Design and Construction has indicated the following. Council were advised by a structural engineer that the previous play unit boardwalk was not safe and it was therefore removed immediately. Council have been working to secure funding to deliver a safe and playful space to replace that play unit. Due to the unprecedented heavy rainfall before Christmas, the site condition became extremely challenging for construction purposes, and according to the availability of our committed contractors, we expect construction will be extended from March 23 to June 23. During this time, the existing sandpit has been renewed and the swing set will remain open to the public. The 3 nearest available parks in Lynbrook during the construction period are McKellar Park Playground, Aylmer Road Playground and Tower Hill Park Playground. Please refer to the on-site signage and Casey Conversation page for more details of the update and the playground concept. Officers say thank you for the patience and understanding, and noting that this is an important playground renewal project. There was also a late question submitted, which we've accepted this afternoon as it relates to a matter on Council's agenda this afternoon, that being item 5.5, the Climate Action Plan, and that is from submitter Cheryl Jones. And the question from Ms Jones is: almost 1,000 contributions out of approximately 300,000 residents from around 150 different cultural backgrounds. Page 168, as of 2021, which works out to 0.03% of the Casey population. This is not enough to continue your current rollout and needs to be submitted to the wider public in a more accessible way so that more can see what is really planned. The agenda minutes and climate action plan I have viewed is nothing more than a very clever business plan, which is not at all user-friendly. You spend far too much time communicating via emails and online communication, which is closed shop, that you really do not see the concerns of the public. Out of your duty of care, I ask you engage a larger percentage of the population before continuing with these plans. Manager Waste and Sustainability has set out a response which details the broader context of feedback that's occurred around climate-related issues and the Climate Action Plan. So the feedback received as part of the consultation from the Climate Action Plan has been part of an ongoing conversation with the community around addressing climate change and protecting and enhancing the environment. Through the Shape Your City community engagement programs throughout 2020-21 and 22-23 respectively, we've heard from more than 10,000 community members, each time overwhelmingly highlighting the need to deliver and invest in the environment through actions like this plan before Council today to address climate change, including the importance of educating the community on how they too can play a part in protecting the environment. The support has consistently been overwhelming, with respondents increasing the importance of funding the protection and enhancement of the environment from third to second highest priority between 2021 and 22-23. In addition to that, between February and April 22, Council consulted with the community via a combination of in-person and online engagements, including surveys and workshops, as well as community pop-up stalls and events, to find out what actions they wanted Council to deliver to address climate change. Almost 1,000 community members who responded to and participated in the engagement opportunities, indicated strong support for Council to adopt net zero emissions targets, as well as actions we proposed across a variety of themes such as transport, renewable energy, waste reduction and energy efficient buildings. A total of 3,345 people had visited the engagement site for more information, with almost 1,246 downloading information from the engagement site. The sentiment and feedback expressed through this engagement on the Climate Action Plan is consistent with other engagements which clearly set an expectation that Council needs to act. The result is the Climate Action Plan that will be implemented over 8 years. There is a strong and ongoing community engagement focus for many of the actions, including with residents, schools and businesses, providing more opportunities to be engaged in the City of Casey's emission reduction response to climate change. So thank you to Ms Jones once again for that question. We now move on to item 5, officer reports. The first of those is the quarterly community report, October to December 2022, and I seek a mover and a seconder.
Chair, I will move that report.
Thank you, Mr Boardman, and a seconder.
Yes, I'll second that.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. Mr Boardman, would you like to speak to your motion?
Thank you very much, Chair. I acknowledge I can't be there in person this afternoon due to a medical condition, which may also impact upon my speech and breathing. I just provided that as a preliminary comment, but in moving this recommendation, I do note that this is the quarterly report up to the period of December last year, so the last calendar quarter of 2022. It highlights a number of actions, financial performance against our budgets. It highlights and comments on our community engagement strategy, particularly as it relates to Shape Your City, which you have referenced in answers to public questions, Chair. And all of this is under the 7 strategic objectives, which we have discussed numerous times when we've been adopting past reports and also when we've been adopting the Council Action Plan, which are clearly articulated and described on page 11 of the Council's documents. Importantly, the quarterly report highlights the 20 events that we as administrators attended in the last quarter of last year, including a voluntary recognition event, business awards and numerous citizenship ceremonies, which we are making full swing, considering that all COVID restrictions have been lifted. And we note that we have a number of citizenship ceremonies already being held this year on Australia Day and coming up with the very near future. Importantly, some of the highlights of this particular report include the Bunjil Place annual survey results, the Creating a Child Safety Community Plan, and also commentary against our library transformation, which will be discussed in further detail with agenda item 6. We further go into quite a bit of detail on our Capital Works program, which interested community members would be aware is a substantial spend of council revenue. In this financial year, it totals $227 million that is being allocated against approximately 540 projects. I and three of us have spoken in the past around a number of financial challenges that we are experiencing that is not unique to Casey, but it is something that we are very conscious around when we are reporting our financial results, to ensure that when we do need to make adjustments to Capital Works or any other aspect of recurring expenditure in the future, that we are doing that from a perspective of complete information, and also that we're taking consideration of community needs, council obligations, the current economic environment. And I think that the information that we have disclosed quite transparently in this report highlights those challenges and the issues that we are currently facing. I do note that in the community feedback there is a slight decrease on overall community satisfaction, with a degree of unsatisfaction from the South and Coastal Villages areas that we have solved, and we've implemented strategies to further engage with those communities to ensure that not only we are representing their needs, but they understand the differential between council services and services provided by other entities, including state and Commonwealth governments. And we do know that some of the dissatisfaction areas that have been identified are not necessarily within the purview of Casey, but matters nonetheless that we do have a leadership and advocacy role to place. We also note that we did receive a relatively low score of satisfaction from those within the 50 to 64-year-old age bracket. Again, strategies have been implemented to better engage with that cohort of the community to ensure our messages are being communicated, but importantly that we are seeking feedback around those key concerns and that those concerns and information are impacted into a strategic decision-making process. With those words, Chair, I do note that this is a very effective communication tool for us with our communities. It is very detailed on our performance against our action plan and our strategic objectives. And we, as we always say, welcome ongoing feedback in the community through Casey conversations and other direct engagement methods to ensure that relevant feedback in areas that we can improve on, particularly from those community sectors which are not as satisfied as we would hope they would be, more factored into our decision making, our thinking into the future. With those comments, I'm pleased to move the quarterly review.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. Mr Belmar.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Mr Boardman for those comments. In seconding this motion, I'm mindful that it's a number of weeks since the 30th of December, which was the completion of the reporting period for this report. During the lifetime that this report covers, I note that there were a number of activities at Council, and it's pleasing to recall what they were and to see that the community is back and using Council facilities increasingly. I note, for example, the number of events that are referred to in here, and programs, including visits and programs conducted by cultural organisations, including the Melbourne Chamber Orchestra, the Australian Chamber Orchestra, and local theatre companies. I note as well other programs, including sporting events that occurred, which attracted organisations including the A-League, Premier Cricket, Little Aths, and the like. So it's fantastic to see the continuing return of activity at the City of Casey. I note as well, and happily recall, the references in the report to the Archibald Prize, which occurred last year, and note that apart from the visits that it generated to the City of Casey, I'm happy to read in this report that it also created a publicity campaign which received and reached almost 20 times more people than the objective that had been set, and attracted a value of that publicity campaign more than 4 times than the objective. So it shows our council officers using technology and using the ability to engage with social media in a way which gets the best value and the best reach for council's events. And I know, for example, a news weather cross was part of that campaign, and also a postcards diary segment. So again, this quarterly report reminds us of all those things that were achieved. I note as well, Mr Boardman's referred to it, that it was the time of the Business Awards, an event that I was privileged to attend and to hear about the fantastic businesses that are established in Casey, that are growing in Casey, and importantly, that were able to demonstrate to us the commitment they have to remaining in Casey. Finally, I want to thank those that have worked on this report. Again, and as always, this report is a straightforward report. It contains a fantastic range of information about what's occurred in Casey during the October to December quarter, and I have noted and read the financial documents, and note that we are entering and have been in times that will require a continual review of those matters, but Council's overall budgetary position is one which will require review, but one which is in hand. And with those comments, I'm happy to second this motion.
Thank you, Mr Belmar, and thank you to both of you for the overview. I think the progress against our strategic objectives is very strong, but this report does provide a very good tool for the community to monitor the council's performance over the quarter, quite detailed and extensive. With that, I'll put the motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried. Thank you. Item 5.2 is the endorsement of governance rules for public exhibition. Do I have a mover for the recommendation?
Yes, I'll move that.
Thank you, Mr Belmar, and a seconder?
Second, Chair.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. Mr Belmar, would you like to speak to your motion?
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to move this motion tonight and note that what we are moving tonight is the endorsement of these governance rules so that they return to public for further comment. I note that these governance rules have already been the subject of review by the community and have resulted in a number of comments which I have considered, including comments from the Casey Residents and Ratepayers Association. In reading the report, I note that these governance rules, and in reading governance rules, I note that these governance rules govern the manner in which council meetings occur, and it's important that as much as community engagement with these rules occurs, so that the community is fully aware of how council meetings occur and have input into these rules, and importantly having input into these rules which will govern council meetings after October 2024, and also a part of the work that we have done as a panel of administrators in ensuring that the documents, our governance documents, are up to date and have had the most input from the community as possible. So with those comments, I'm happy to move these rules and encourage the community to engage with them, to review them, to take the invitation to comment on them, because it's with that input that they can be improved and that we can consider them further when they return to us. And with those comments, I'm happy to move this motion.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. Mr Boardman, would you like to speak to the motion?
Chair, I'll reserve my right on move the next agenda items connected on that stage.
Thank you. I'll nevertheless put this to the vote. All in favour? Carried. Item 5.3, the adoption of the governance local law. We're now on to page 112 for those that are following the agenda. Do I have a mover for the recommendation?
I'll move that, Chair.
Thank you, Mr Boardman, and a seconder?
Yes, I'll second that.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. Mr Boardman.
Thank you, Chair. To save repeating what Mr Belmar has already remarked, this is a procedural resolution that is effectively providing an enabling mechanism for governance rules once that they are adopted the subsequent meeting, based on further community engagement. We note that governance rules, and I have certainly made this comment previously, are very prescriptive. They certainly give us detailed aspects around the procedures and certainly the mechanics of a meeting, which may or may not be considered the best practice, but in the circumstances, considering some challenges that have been endemic in this sector in the past, and sadly in some municipalities currently, that level of prescription is necessary. But it is not singular to have governance rules without having local laws that enable a degree of review and, if the circumstances permit, penalties if conduct and behaviour is not complying with the governance rules. This is a recommendation by the adoption of the Governance Local Law 2022 is seeking to do. It should be pointed out here that there is a good contract between councillors or themselves as administrators specifically and the community and vice versa, to conduct ourselves with a best practice, best behaviour basis. The governance rules do articulate that, particularly from the procedural aspect of council meetings. But the process and the administrative aspects that are contained in the local law do provide opportunity for the Chief Executive Officer in there and councillors themselves to look at any actions consequential from breaches against the government's rules in such circumstances. And I'm satisfied by the process that the government's team here at Casey is undertaking to ensure that we have not just met legislative requirements, but we have complied with our administrative requirements in the Casey local laws, and that all aspects contained in the recommendations, including certification from an independent legal practitioner, ensure that once the governance rules return to us and are adopted, they can be acted and the local law will be applicable at that stage. I don't have any further comment from the submissions that received have been noted. There's been comments from the government's team against those submissions. It probably goes to the complexity of the governance rules themselves insofar as some of the commentary in those submissions, but from our perspective, we've certainly taken notice of those and we don't believe there is any further changes to the local law itself. We do welcome further community feedback on the governance rules over the foreseeable future.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. Mr Belmar.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr Boardman, for those comments. In reviewing this item tonight, I note that it refers to the procedure for the use of our common seal. It's appropriate that we adopt those rules. I note that it's perhaps a peculiarity of this sector that we continue to have very specific rules about the use of the common seal, and in the context of it being the manner in which council sign documents formally, it is appropriate that we have clear and adopted rules about its use. On the second issue, which has resulted in a number of submitted comments, it relates to definitions and the application of penalties for behaviour at council meetings. Can I say that any rules or meeting procedure that has to deal with inappropriate behaviour is one which is clear to all participants at meetings when they join an organisation, and they are really a matter of last resort. Any member of council will be aware of their existence, will be trained in and have ongoing training as to how it applies, and I am confident that that training will ensure that insofar as possible they are an ultimate backstop. But as a matter of complying with the Local Government Act and our obligations to have rules that comply and to ensure good governance, it's appropriate that they exist, it's appropriate that they are updated, and it's appropriate and I'm confident that training will occur on them. And with those comments, I'm happy to second this motion.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. Put the motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried. Item 5.4 is the instrument of authorisation under the Planning and Environment Act. It's a procedural matter. Do I have a mover?
Yes, I'll move that.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. And a seconder?
Second, Chair.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. Mr Belmar.
Thank you, Chair. From time to time, we have these motions come before us. I have read and considered this motion. It is a procedural motion, but as I've said at previous meetings, it's an important procedural motion because it creates the power under the Planning and Environment Act for council officers to use delegated authority to make important decisions. I note that a number of council officers have been removed, others have been added. I thank those council officers whose duty it is to keep these documents up to date, because having had other experience in this jurisdiction, I'm aware that there are members of the legal community who take a fine-tooth comb to these sorts of documents and look for ways to challenge council decisions. And I'm confident that this is a council which ensures that at all times those making decisions have the proper power to do so. And with those comments, I'm happy to move this motion.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. Mr Boardman, any further comments?
I completely endorse Mr Belmar's comments.
Thank you. I'll put the motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried. Item 5.5 is the adoption of the Casey Climate Action Plan. Do I have a mover for the recommendation?
I will move this recommendation, Chair.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. And a seconder?
Yes, I'll second it.
Mr Belmar. Mr Boardman.
Chair, thank you for the opportunity to speak on this. I know we had a late question with Chair Jones in relation. I'll comment on that briefly, but begin my remarks by stating quite clearly that this is one of the most clearly articulated, no-nonsense, non-ideologically backed, common-sense plans that I think I have had the fortuitousness to review in some time. If we start with the 6 themes of the plan, being energy efficient buildings, renewable energy and transport, circular economy, sustainable land use planning, and education and empowerment, I really can't find any way that any reasonable person is argue against the actions and the intent to enshrine not just to improve the organisational capability, energy efficiency and economic efficiency against those 6 things, but the overall community's positions. This is a very, as I've said, common sense and practical plan, which is not only dealing with reductions against a climate prison, but it is dealing with a much more sensible use of council resources consistent with the legislative obligations that are not anything new or anything that is particularly shocking or surprising. These are extensions of what has been happening in the community for some time, will continue to evolve as technology improves, but also will result in much cleaner, economically viable and responsive organisations as well. I think we've also got to look at it that key point that there's nothing particularly shocking or new in this, which needs to be considered from any potential remote response. Because in 2018, the previous council did adopt the Casey Emissions Management Plan, which made it quite clear that there was going to be an emissions reduction strategy as a key component of that. Interestingly, in the 4 years, the target was expected to achieve 59% emissions reductions, which comprised of a number of achievements, including sourcing 100% wind power for repowering streetlights with a power purchase agreement. Not only the use of technology, but also an economic advantage to the city. Installing considerable solar and building efficiency improvements that only resulted in the award of the Keep Australia for Energy Category Award. Also has been a significant cost saving to the organisation, one which is not just adopted universally through government and municipal offices, but also received through the extraordinary uptake of domestic solar installations. This is something that is very commonplace in the community. And we also saw as one of the achievements of the Emissions Management Plan 2018-2022, transitioning the Casey corporate fleet to 100% electric hybrid vehicles and contracting for the 100% electric waste truck rubbish collection. So this is not a new thing. This is something that we have been investing in as technology improves to not just look at it through better utilisation of technology to achieve a much more energy efficient output, but also the significant commercial and economic positive outputs that such a plan develops. And if I go back to those 8 things, the actions, a number of which have already been implemented, and more will be implemented in forthcoming months and years. it is very difficult to argue against the practicality, the common sense, and the quite significant benefits that something like this produces. But we also need to look at this through the lens that there are some legislative and partnership obligations that the City of Casey does have. On page 14 of the plan, we do list those requirements. There is a requirement under Climate Change Bill 2020, which I think is now passed in the National Parliament, that all organisations need to at least achieve a 43% reduction by 2030 and have net zero by 2050. Well, we're proposing that we have net zero by 2030 in advance of our legislative obligation to the National Act, because we think it's achievable, it's economic and sustainable, and it's frankly the right thing to do. There is also state legislation under the Victoria's Climate Change Act, which is similarly set targets for 2050, with the state indicating that they may be reviewed. So irrespective of what council may or may not do, we have those underpinning and overarching legislative objectives we have to achieve by 2030 and 2050 respectively. Our approach strategically, economically and quite comfortably is to achieve the overall objective by 2020, which is clearly articulated by the actions in this plan, which will, I think, the evidence is overwhelming, will bring about significant and tangible benefits. So to members of the community that may have concerns over the use of language or the approach, my feedback is very clear. Please take time to read the plan, read the details of the actions, read the details of the budget, the commitments we've already made, the commitments we're going to make. They are significant insofar as the achievements that they will bring about, but they are not significant insofar as the overall budgetary position of the organisation. It is one of those dollar factors which the tangible outputs far exceed the input on the budget and investment perspective. But also have a look at the reasons why we're doing this. It's not to achieve some ideological benefit that satisfy or pacify a certain sector of the community. This is practical, common sense, energy efficient utilisation of technology that has not just an environmental benefit, but as I said, a significant community benefit concurrently. So I really congratulate them that put this action plan together. I thank them for the way that they've embraced this debate through a very practical and very economic and commercial and budget conscious lens, and one where you take away the ideology and the treat, and you have a plan that shows benefits far outweighing the initial investments and far in excess of any additional or unfortunate community commentary that might exist. So again, if I can conclude, Chair, for those members of the community that may have some concerns over this directions, your concerns will thoroughly be alleviated in reading the detail, understanding the intent, the benefits and the objectives, and most importantly, realising that this is a long-term investment that is going to have significant benefits to the organisation and the overall Casey community, well in excess of the 8 years of its life cycle. So again, congratulations to those involved in its preparation. I wish every success to all stakeholders, including an external stakeholders on the implementation, and I very much look forward to receiving periodic performance reports against the actions and objectives.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. Mr Belmar.
Thank you, Chair. I thank Mr Boardman for his comments. I note that the recommendation includes that is in 4 parts, and it includes not only the adoption of the Climate Action Plan, but also that Council supports the target to achieve net zero corporate emissions by 2030 or sooner, that Council supports the Climate Action Plan 2022-30 and prioritises aligned actions in subsequent budget cycles, and fourthly, that Council supports fast-tracking the Climate Active Carbon Neutrality certification by committing required funds to the 4-year budget cycle. I endorse all the comments that have been made by Mr Boardman. I note that this is a responsible document that carefully considers the opportunities Council has to make its own contribution to climate action. I note that this is a Council that has been, as is reflected in this document, this is a Council that has been making responsible decisions about the way it can reduce its emissions for many years. I note the reference to the Greenhouse Strategy Local Action Plan in 2002, and since that time this council had the second largest LED streetlight upgrade program in Australia. And what that tells me is that the sorts of...
Sorry, could I just interrupt? Could I just ask the gallery, please? We are discussing this matter, so thank you. Please proceed, Mr Belmar.
Thank you, Chair. What that tells me is that the sorts of actions that this council proposes through this document are the kinds of actions which a responsible organisation will take in the careful management of what it can do in what is a wider issue than just the City of Casey. I note the reference in our council plan to the fact that there are both international, national, state documents and policies which have been adopted and which we have a responsibility as council to do our bit to ensure that we are adhering to them. I note this week in particular, Chair, that in social media with the news that the previous President Jimmy Carter has been unwell, and the sorts of issues that he took devoted his life to. One of those was that in the 1970s he ensured that solar panels were attached to the White House. So these are not new issues. These are issues that have been known about for some time. It's appropriate that a plan like this be adopted. It's a responsible plan. I note the budgetary implications have been considered in the document that prefaces the plan. I note that significant funds have already been put forward and have been budgeted for, and in the future careful budgetary decisions will be taken for any new actions. And with those comments, I am happy to endorse this plan and second the motion.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. I'll put the motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried. Item 5.6 is the final officer report this afternoon, and that is the new regional library agreement for the Casey Cardinia Library. Do I have a mover for the recommendation?
Yes. I will move that motion.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. And a seconder?
Second, Chair.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. Mr Belmar.
Thank you, Chair. In moving this motion tonight, I note that I'm moving a motion with 4 parts. That is, that Council endorses the new regional library agreement with the Casey Cardinia Library Corporation. That secondly, we endorse the affixing of the Council seal to the agreement. That we note that the new Casey Cardinia Library Corporation has a governance policy, and lastly notes that the updated Casey Cardinia Library Corporation Local Law Number 1. As I mentioned earlier in the meeting, Chair, I'm a member of the board of the Casey Cardinia Library Corporation. It is a new era for the corporation, but I want to assure members of council and the community that the services that that the library has offered are continuing to be offered. I note that it is a time for change, and it is appropriate that these documents that have been prepared, carefully considered, received legal consideration, provide the basis for the Casey Cardinia Library Corporation to go forward. I want to thank members of council that have worked on these documents. I note in particular and excitingly that what the plan and what the new Casey Cardinia Library agreement will provide is that there be independent members of the board who will bring their particular expertise to how the library will function in the future. I note that libraries have been around for a long time, but the way in which we are using technology and knowledge is ever changing, and it's appropriate that we use the opportunity to consider the provision of library services in the City of Casey and how we can best use the assets that we already have and bringing outside expertise in technology is one way of doing that, and it's exciting to see that that is something that we will be embarking upon. And with those comments, I'm happy to move this motion.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. Mr Boardman.
Chair, can I just make some brief comments? I could make some more extensive comments around the assistance or otherwise provided by the state government in relation to this particular issue, but I won't. I will say that this has been an exhaustive process, one through a best practice governance lens, which has resulted in the best possible outcome. Certainly testament to Belmar's leadership and the assistance of Mr Colden and others in the organisation and within the Library Corporation itself. But one that I think we have, as administrators, not just been extensively involved in because of personal input and interest, but one that has been scrutinised, considered, evaluated and assessed through a lens of diligence that I think is probably in the circumstances a benchmark for the sector. The ensuing result is an organisation that will be much more sustainable for the community and for the municipality, one that addresses governance issues and also takes into consideration the changing business model within the Libraries Corporation. It is important that we provide confidence to the community that we've approached this duty through meeting the expectations of the community and providing the best possible structure for the Library Corporation to thrive in the future, and I'm very confident that that has been the result. So again, I place on my record appreciation to Mr Belmar and Mr Colden, to everyone within the organisation for their assistance and patience throughout this exercise, and wish the corporation success in the future under its new structure, which would certainly prepare it for future success as articulated.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. And apropos to your earlier comments, we do understand that officers will provide feedback to Local Government Victoria with respect to the issues around the legislation that we've had to deal with in this matter. I'll put the motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried. Thank you. Item 6 is consideration of reports of committees, and I simply note the report of committees as listed in the agenda paper, and those reports are from 2 sets of minutes from the Audit and Risk Committee, including the most recent meeting in mid-February. Item 7 is petitions, and as referenced earlier, there's one petition received this evening which includes 80 signatures, and that's with regard to the toilet block installation at Berwick Springs Wetland Reserve, West Playground renewal. And the recommendation there is the petition be noted and referred to the Manager, City and Asset Planning, who'll coordinate a response and further discussion with the head petitioner and residents in proximity to the proposed toilet. So do I have a mover for that recommendation with respect to the petition?
Yes, I'll move that.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. And a seconder?
Second, Chair.
Mr Boardman, I'll put that to the vote. All in favour? Carried. Item 8 is urgent business, and there have been no urgent business items received for the council meeting tonight. Item 9 is closed council, and there are no closed council items. So that leaves me with the item 10, which is to close the meeting, to thank members of the public for their attendance in the gallery this afternoon, and particularly for those who've submitted questions to council. So thank you and good afternoon.